The war in Ukraine is changing faster than we can keep up, and it's not close. I mean, in the United States and across much of NATO, we're still identifying affordable and scalable drone jammers, while Russia switched over to wire-guided options nearly a year ago. Now, Ukraine is keeping up because it's a matter of life and death, but generally speaking, we're not. At least, not yet. Now, to solve this issue, NATO has put together JATEC, or the Joint Analysis, Training, and Education Center, which is focused on taking lessons from Ukraine and rapidly implementing solutions that can be scaled across the alliance. To learn more about this initiative, we're talking today with Colonel Valerii Vyshnivskyi and Bart Holland. Colonel Vyshnivskyi is the senior representative of Ukraine to JATEC and their director of program implementation, and Bart is the innovation broker at NATO headquarters and the chair of the NATO Innovation Network. We get into the innovation challenges they're putting together to source new technologies, how they're soliciting issues directly from soldiers at the front, and how this NATO-Ukraine relationship is a big win for all parties involved. You can learn more about this program and submit your solutions at the links below. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Bart, Valerii, thank you both so much for taking the time today. There's a lot here that I didn't know about, and I'm pretty certain that most of the audience hasn't heard of some of these initiatives as well. So really excited to dig into this. And I think a good starting point here would be understanding what is JATEC. Also, am I saying that right? Is it JATEC?
So it is a JATEC.
All right, perfect.
It is a Joint Analysis, Training, and Education Center. The center was established in the call of Warsaw Summit in 2020-24, where was taken a decision to establish the center which supports NATO and Ukraine in case of lessons learned, analysis, training, education based on Ukraine forwarded experience. And this experience should be covered and installed in NATO doctrines, publications, in the NATO exercise and training. And in parallel, we are developing common NATO-Ukraine capabilities by developing innovations, by analyzing the lost trends and activities on the battlefield. So we are preparing both NATO and Ukraine for current and future threats. So this is the into words, what is it, the JATEC. And some technical information. We were established 17th of February this year. And further, I'm ready to highlight on some of our achievements.
That's awesome. So it's really a way, it's a formal means of taking lessons learned from Ukraine and kind of workshopping those in NATO, but also the private sector. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We are dual unique organization. NATO Ukraine means the first NATO and partner organization, and military civilian. In our organization, we work shoulder to shoulder with our civilian colleagues to install civilian aspects in our development. So we have a line of efforts which is called resilience and total defense. So we're analyzing the Ukrainian approach to total war, how our nation resists to these threats, how to resist to electricity cutting, water shortfalls, food security, and other means from cyber defense till energy grids protection. Everything we get together and in line here under the JATEC.
So, Bart, I'm sure you've probably got your hands full in NATO trying to identify and implement civilian solutions. With a little bit of experience in the U.S. military, we really struggle with that. Are you guys kind of streamlining that process in NATO, or what does that look like, especially with JATEC now?
So in general, it absolutely has our attention, right? So if you look at innovation in military capabilities, we need to accept the fact that innovation in private sector and civilian sectors goes a lot faster than we can ever mobilize in the military sphere. Especially if you look at what's going on in Ukraine right now. Product life cycles have shortened to 6 weeks, right? That's, I think, a rough estimate that I read somewhere. And that is something that's a speed of innovation that we need to make our allies, how do I say this? able to process, right? We need to be able to lean on what's going on in civilian markets. We need to be able to quickly acquire assets if we want to, and also focus on novel ways of contracting things, like, for example, service-based. And that is something that we do. Yeah, for sure.
So I think it'd be
I think
great to jump into an example here. Yeah, go ahead, Valerie.
if you allow me to add to your answer, you're absolutely right. But in a fighting country, then civil sector jump immediately into military sector, and then military innovations are in forward, and that's we are fighting, and the NATO nations are at the peace time. That's why civilian companies are goes ahead. That's simply. But in a fighting country, that's military sector moves and drives everything's around.
I feel like part of that, though, is the government's responsibility to streamline the process and make it easier. And, if our procurement process is 2 years long and you're talking about a 6-week innovation cycle, it's pointless. Like, it's 2 different languages. So it's definitely a difference of a country at war versus countries at peace. But our government, again, from a U.S. perspective, I don't know that we've necessarily made that jump to make it easier to procure things in a timely fashion.
But I think when shells and missiles come down to the head of your governments, everything changes immediately. So, Bart, please, you wanted to answer.
Yeah, no, it's a super valid point, right? So technology moves faster than we can. That is an uncomfortable truth. We see that in Ukraine. That is a matter of life and death. And yes, governments struggle with this, but that's exactly what we're trying to change on a case by case basis, but also to see if we can sort of create a paradigm shift. So if you look at I'm going to call it traditional way of procuring means or assets for the military, that is a lengthy process, right? First, we figure out what the future looks like. Then we figure out what a potential conflict in the future like that would look like, what kind of assets or capabilities we need. And based on that, we start procuring. And for traditional large-scale capabilities, that makes a lot of sense. You don't buy a frigate on a whim. You want to do this very deliberately. Keep in mind that a lot of these processes originate in times of austerity, especially in Europe, where every euro spent needed to be accounted for very, very closely. If we look at what's going on right now, we need to reverse that model. And that's also what we do in innovation projects that we start. Acknowledge the fact that the future is already here, right? There's, I think it's William Gibson that said it. The future is here. It's just unevenly distributed. So our job is no longer to figure out what the future might look like, but to find the puzzle pieces of that future that are here already and incorporate them very quickly. The way we do this in our projects, the innovation challenge is one of those ways that we try to quickly integrate these things, is by experimental introduction. So instead of designing exercises to test technologies or to test the readiness of a technology for integration, we design an operation and insert technology into that operation and see in how many pieces it comes back. That's pretty much it, right? There's a high attrition rate to this, but it also allows us and industry to learn very, very quickly what is necessary to bring in these often civilian technologies into real world conditions, as we call it, in military operations.
All right, so I know a lot of the people listening, I see your emails. You work at drone companies or UGV companies or medical supply companies, and I've gotten a lot of emails about how can I get this technology over there or donate this equipment. This is actually one of the ways to do that. So private companies can apply to these innovation challenges and kind of pitch their solution to these things. We'll have the link to the medical innovation challenge in the description below. But definitely, like, if you're in a company or run a company in this general space, keep an eye on this. It could be like huge business opportunities for your organization. But I wanted to see if we could get into some of the details, guys, of past innovation challenges. Can you maybe grab one or two and talk through a problem set, maybe a couple solutions that came out of it, and what that has looked like in terms of rolling out the solution across Ukraine or the alliance? I know that's a lot there, but anything in that direction would be great.
If you don't mind, I will start. So we here at JATEC, we didn't use all the innovation cycle of ACT. So we just take a separate tool as innovation challenge, because what we identified that there is a lack of solution against some threats on the battlefield. So, and here I have to describe that since 2023, we started to face the gliding bombs. This is the common new threats evolving. There's such munitions, which Russia started to launch from 40 kilometers. And then that was called from a battlefield that maybe you have any solutions how to resist of these gliding bombs. And first, what we came in our head, that's NATO could provide us the proper distance missile, anti-aircraft missiles to land because it's only 40 kilometers. But now, when we came almost to final decision, the Russians are capable to launch them from 100, and there was some attempts to 200 kilometers. So air defense missiles, it's not a proper way. And then, recall that we used the ACT Innovation Challenge. So we call for industry startups, company from NATO, Ukraine to provide their best solution to resist in this area. The second area, this is the drones on the battlefield. This is the Pigeon or Raven type 9-dюйм flying item. This RPG grenade, which can target tanks, IFV, APC, any vehicles on the battlefield, and they hunt soldiers in the trenches. So it changes the landscape of war enormously. So if you have a node of defense, first gliding bombs destroy your node, then drones come and start to hunt the soldiers. But in Ukraine, we are very successful in electronic warfare and at some points, we could land a big percentage of that drones. And then Russians evaluated and used fiber optic drones, which are not visible on the radars and absolutely resistible to jamming, electronic warfare. So that was our second innovation challenge, 15th. First one was 14th, then 15th innovation challenge. And this brings us to some ideas. And between 20th and 25th of October on the polygon in France, we tested the solutions against gliding bombs, against Shahid type drones, because these solutions, drones interceptors, they are very, how to say, efficient against Shahid type drones. And we found some radars that can identify fiber optic drones on the battlefield. So this is our short story, and we are waiting for a final report from the Biscarrosse field.
That's incredible. So the idea of identifying fiber optics on a radar is huge. Bart, what does that look like then? They've got the solution identified. This is solving a problem on the battlefield, but it might be a one-off type product, certainly not mass produced like in military numbers. What does it look like to go from that to either broad distribution in Ukraine or across the alliance?
So there's a couple of things going on, right? So if you look at the innovation challenge, it's one of the tools in our toolbox to engage with industry or with creative ideas, right? Because it's not necessarily industry that applies to these. These can also be student teams that have a creative concept that might fit the problem we described. I think if you look at the innovation challenge, it's more of like sort of the bat signal that we turn on whenever there's a problem that we have difficulty finding a solution for. So we outline the problem, we write the scenario, we turn on the bat signal, hoping that everybody looks in the sky and sees that we want to do this. And then we solicit these kind of creative ideas. And they can come from anywhere, from a student team that has a startup idea to a prime that has a direct product that they can deploy. We're agnostic to this. We just need the ideas. Then based on what we get, we try to link that to actors inside of our ecosystem as best as we can. For the drone challenges that Valerii mentioned, that is directly to JATEC to Ukraine. We don't want to add other organizations to this. We need to keep the lines as short as we can to move as fast as we can. If we look at NATO capability development goals, oftentimes, if it's a startup, we'll refer it to Diana, which is an accelerator program. If it's larger industry, we bring them to attention to the NATO Innovation Fund, which is more of a venture capital fund. And if it's more a research-oriented proposal, we'll bring it into our own headquarters here in Norfolk to see if we can bring this into the NATO development plans. So there's sort of a Yeah, it's almost like a sort of workflow. I hate the word, but that's the way that we approach the information that we get out of this. But I think what's the added value of the innovation challenge is that we approach a problem completely actor agnostic. So we try to eliminate the usual suspects that we interact with. We just send it out there worldwide for everybody to see, and then we see what comes out of it. And the moment something useful comes out of it, we'll interconnect it as soon as we can.
Can soldiers apply?
Yes, anybody can.
Because I'm sure that's happening, right? There's soldiers all across the front. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupt you.
No, I want to hear it. Yeah.
So that was the case. We brought our experts from a battlefield who resist to this disease on the battlefield. For both of them, there was Ukrainian experts in a uniform, not guys from the offices or civilian or whatever, just directly from the trenches. That's of course there was officers, but officers in the rank of senior lieutenant, captain, who resist this type of threats every day. And we created a cross-breed NATO-Ukraine team, which pre-arranged, pre-selected the solutions, because we've got around 160 requests for the innovation challenge. That's why we had to prioritize them, because we have that proper subject matter experts who can say at the beginning, so this is not real, guys.
Valerii, this is exactly why the innovation challenge is such a powerful instrument compared to a startup accelerator or a venture capital fund. The innovation challenge is designed to be as close to the end user as possible. So while writing scenarios, while writing the challenge, we are in contact with the people who actually experience the problem. And when selecting winners or identifying potential solutions, we don't do that ourselves, right? I am exactly the kind of desk clerk that Valerii just mentioned. No, we need people on the ground that want to operate or recognize the problem that we are working on to deliver input and determine whether or not a solution is viable. So that's also what sets the innovation challenge aside from the more traditional ways of us reaching out to potential solution providers. We are open to any kind of creative idea, and at the moment that the end users recognize that it has value, we will pursue it, and we will make sure that it's either connected or that we incorporate it into our own headquarters and put some resources to this. That it's an incredibly agile methodology of working, which often delivers surprising solutions, but that is exactly what we are after.
It is hard to, you guys get this, but for the audience, it is hard to overstate how important that is, getting the feedback directly from the front and not a couple levels up from the front. I mean, when you go to even the battalion or brigade level and start asking the questions there, you go from something to counter FPV drones to a large purchase for, and this is not talking about Ukraine, this is militaries in general. It goes from a unique solution to counter a specific threat to new tires for trucks. And you're like, what the hell is this? Like, I guess it's something, but it sure isn't solving the problem that the guys dealing with it day in and day out have to experience. So that's huge. And I love that you guys are facilitating that. Can we talk? I want to get into the current one that's ongoing right now. It's the Medical Innovation Challenge. Can you, Valerii, maybe can you talk about some of the issues that are trying to be resolved in this specific challenge?
So first of all, a context to be more understandable. So there is no front line, linear front line is not existing. It's a gray zone from 500 till 10 kilometers, mixed up these positions, dugouts, trenches, filled these our troops and enemy. And this gray zone is infiltrated by different type of drones, quadrocopter, first view person, fiber optic, and any movement is a counter. Any movement is under the control. 100% of clear battlefield. There is no fog of war. No, not anymore. Every movement is stopped. So as up to now, Russians disregard any law of war, any rules of engagement, whatever. So our medics are target for that. So if we have a wounded person, we send there the evacuation team. An evacuation team is a super easy target for Russians. At this stage, we have a huge problem with the medical evacuation. It's enormous. So there is no more golden hour, at least in our case of war. So let's make it this way. At this war, no time for golden hour. Sometimes people have to wait for 6 hours, 24 hours or longer because the rotation, resupply, evacuation could be done only in the fog at night or whatever. But using the infrared camera, you can work at night. So no problem. No problem is that. So medical evacuation, now the biggest challenge which directly influence the morale of soldiers on the battlefield. Can you imagine to fight with in one trench with the guy who is bleeding almost leg or arm? How it influence you? So we need a way, smart way, how to evacuate people from the trenches. We have no strict rule that it should be this platform, that platform. We need idea how to tackle it in a secured environment of a drone, contested by electronic warfare, by lots of other means. So we need this idea. And that's why we're going to organize on a 4th, 5th December, the Innovation Challenge on evacuation. Initially, yeah, we're gonna start it in London. It's gonna be in London.
I think I might be there in London for that one. I don't know if either one of you guys are going to be there for that challenge.
I'm planning to be there. I'm planning at the stage. I'm planning because this is my key interest, and me and my organization in Ukraine, of course.
I'm excited to see what is brought forward. So we've got the medical evacuation. Is there anything else being looked at, or is that kind of the focus of this specific contest?
So focus. If you have an unmanned platform for FPV, it's more easy target than any other type of vehicle because it's still slow. It's 10 kilometers per hour of movement. So the unmanned platform, the same can be targeted. So we discuss about the delivery blood or any supply, medical supply directly into the trenches. But then in the trenches, we have to keep professional medics because, blood resupply, it's not easy thing. You need to be specially trained. It's not like in a change of oil in a car. So then the questions jumps to how to come down to the engagement zone, how to load the wounded person, and how to escape from that.
All right, that's a lot. That's definitely something that, Bart, I have a question for you here about kind of the NATO view on all of this, because NATO was in Afghanistan for 20 plus years, and we just flew helicopters in. When there was a casualty, within 100, 200 meters, usually, especially in certain areas of the country, you could just put a medevac chopper with a surgeon on board right on top of that casualty. And we're talking, you guys know this, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, and they're there. It was incredible. And that is clearly not an option anywhere along the front. So we have to look at these new methods, which, Bart, a question I have is, of course, it seems like NATO is doing a lot to facilitate innovation and deliveries within Ukraine. How much of this is actually transferring to NATO capabilities, though? Have you seen more countries be interested in adapting, again, the drone countermeasures, for example, or the medevac? We've got our system. Are you seeing NATO start to look at what's happening in Ukraine and say, maybe we should start adapting to some of these other techniques that we might be in here before too long?
Yeah, definitely. The answer is a resounding yes, but it requires a little bit more context, right? So the difference between a country at war and the way that we develop our own capabilities is vast in some areas. But we see that our adversary in the East has very little regard for the rules of the game as we were used to it. We've seen this in the Baltic, right, with the cable cuts and acts of vandalism by the Shadow Fleet. We've also seen it in Poland, Denmark, and Belgium lately with drone incursions in our protected airspace. So the problems that Ukraine faces, we also face, maybe to a lesser extent, but they're just as real for us as they are for the Ukrainians. So especially in these areas, you see an immediate interest in solutions that are also deployed in Ukraine, and vice versa, right? And a very, very strong sense of purpose to share the knowledge through JATEC, right, with the Ukrainians about what we know, what we can do, but definitely also the other way around. I think currently, if you look at critical undersea infrastructure protection, that is a really big one. If you look at counter drone incursions, counter UAV, counter UAS, that is a very, very big one that we also focus on. And for the medical field, for this challenge, what I think is relevant to know, and it's exactly what you say, right? So allies are used to being able to deliver a standard of care in the battlefield that very closely matches the civilian standard of care. We are required to do so by law. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine, all the paradigm no longer applies. We are not able to do this. Valerii mentioned golden hour. It's been stretched up to a golden day in the worst cases, and sometimes even longer. And that is something that, from a legislative point of view, is unacceptable. So regardless of us being in the capability development paradigm that you would have in peacetime, we recognize that if a crisis happens, we are no longer able to keep this up. So for us, implementing solutions that come out of these challenges just as urgent, except that it might happen a little slower because our processes are still a little slower.
So, as for me, it's always curious why NATO goes from theory to practice. In reality, in my life at least, we all go from practice to reality, from small to big. So first we establish a small unit, then unit grows, then we have a couple of that units, then we have unmanned command, and then when we have unmanned command, they will write the doctrine. That's why to write medical standards doctrines books, medical books, it's a long term which first invests to the papers and then to real capability. From my perspective, if you need fast capabilities, so look at the Ukraine, take a couple of surgery teams and provide them to roll to hospital to stabilization point. It's non-lethal support. No one will blame you that you support Ukraine military activities, because in NATO nations we have some recovery hospitals where you treat our injured soldiers, and I'm deeply thankful for that, guys. Thank you very much. So please take a surgical team, send to Ukraine. They save lives. They see the casualty rate estimation. They will work with this contested environment, this mass casualty, and other medical terms what I don't know. So for me, it's obvious. And when you have these one or two experienced teams, they will provide you the super doctrine, which will work across the NATO.
I'd like to tap into that because what I really like about this is that you say that we move from theory to practice, and we should move from practice to theory. That's exactly what we're also trying to do at our level, right? I mean, we're a 4-star headquarters, we're paper pushers. But if you look at the way that we want to integrate technology into what we are doing, that is precisely what we mean with this experimental introduction. We have to acknowledge that real world conditions cannot be written down on paper. We saw this in the Baltic, Task Force X Baltic, a project that we did introducing unmanned systems there. Real world conditions are something different than an integration exercise that you can plan 2 years in advance. You want industry to be able to introduce assets in an experimental setting, but definitely in real world conditions, wherever you can find them. And for this case, if we look at the Medical Innovation Challenge, Ukraine is very close to delivering those kind of conditions, and that's why we focus on this. For other areas of capability development, we have other locations to be where these real-world conditions exist, but we need to go there. We need to bring technology in. We need to bring the people in that work with these things so that we can develop our capabilities, because the traditional model does not always fit anymore. I think you were spot on, Valerii. Thank you for mentioning this.
I mean, I think you guys hit on exactly why this partnership is so important. Ukraine has the real world experiences. NATO has maybe the capabilities and the back end power. The combination there can be very, very beneficial for everyone. So thank you both for what you're doing here, for highlighting this and for keeping the ball moving. I think it's going to be, again, hopefully very helpful for Ukraine in the short term and helpful for NATO in the long term. But Bart, Valerie, thank you both so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure, for sure.
So thank you again so much to Bart and Valerie for taking the time to walk through all of that. Personally, I'm pretty relieved to hear that we have an organization like this inside of NATO that is doing everything they can to try to stay on top of the rapidly changing requirements on a modern battlefield. So, I said it a couple times in the video, but I want to stress it again. This is such a mutually beneficial relationship, right? So Ukraine gets the benefit of the backing of NATO, be it financial or administrative, or just the network of tapping into so many people and companies around the world to try to provide solutions to some of these current challenges in the battlefield that they can roll out immediately, right? In very short order. This technology and these innovations can be put to use near the front line. And then selfishly, from a US and NATO perspective, we are getting these lessons learned, not just watching it on video or hearing somebody talk about it, but as Valerie mentioned, they are sourcing soldiers on the front line, talking about what are the issues they're facing today. Not last month, not last year, not even last week, today. What are the biggest issues and the shortfalls of kind of current NATO technology in facing down the Russian threat? It's win-win, and I love seeing this is coming together, and hopefully it continues for quite a while. Again, if interested, you can check out the links to JATEC and the innovation challenges in the description below. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.